As investors and developers, we see the world differently. This podcast uncovers the untold truths of what it really takes to become a multi-million dollar residential developer. I'm Nathan Battershall. Let's get to work. Well, welcome to the Residential Developer Podcast. My name's Nathan Battershall. I'm the host. And this is our very first episode. And it's very fitting that I introduce you to you today. My partner in crime, someone who's been working alongside me for quite a while now. She's an incredible designer, has amazing insights. So I want to introduce to you today, Maria Laverde. Welcome to the podcast, Maria.
Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you here.
Thank you.
Well, obviously our audience is developers, investors. You and I talk to them day in, day out. So I thought today what we could talk about is a little bit about CDC duplexes, just some hacks, everything CDC duplex. I know it comes natural to you. For those who don't know, Maria's designed upwards of 300, I'd say, duplexes, CDC,
so. Yeah.
in the last 3 or 4 years since the low-rise code came out. So do you want to tell us, just give us a little bit of background about yourself? Obviously, you came over from Colombia, recently went back and spent some time back in Colombia. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background, where you grew up, what led you into design and specifically becoming a real specialist around duplexes and working with investors and developers on development-based projects?
Right. Well, I am originally from Colombia, and I studied my bachelor in civil engineering there. I decided to move to Australia in 2013 to learn English, and I never came back. I decided to stay in Australia studying building design. So with the idea I could go back to Colombia and work, but I never did. So I started working as a building designer in Australia. And after visiting some of the designs that I have already have done built, I decided to also study interior design. So I'm a civil engineer, building designer, interior designer, color consultant, and I am a livable assessor as well. So a little bit.
Pretty much a specialist in everything and anything design.
Hopefully, that is the aim that we have in the company.
Dream.
Yeah, that is the aim. And my focus is duplexes. I love them. And that is probably the main reason why I work at Duplex Building Design.
Yeah, excellent. And in terms of obviously design, have you always had a passion in design? Like what actually made you want to go into design? Obviously going from engineering to building design, yes, they're similar in some ways, but quite different. Obviously, design's very creative, and I know you're super creative too. So I guess why building design? Why not graphic design? Why not another design base?
I love the aesthetics of houses. I love the feeling of being in a beautiful, well-designed house. I am the person that goes in the car looking around houses and thinking, what would I have done better? Or what if that would be my house? What would I change to make it stand out? So I always knew that it was about architecture. But in general, I like design, I like arts, I like handcrafts. So I wanted something that I could have physically in front of me and that will last. So that was probably what I picked, design and architecture. And my favorite part is residential over commercial, personal preference. So, and I like the low to medium. Duplexes is the perfect example of it.
Yeah. And look, obviously you've been lucky enough to be in the industry when the low-rise diversity code came out. Obviously that's such a incredible space now, which we're obviously going to unpack today around doing duplexes under the low-rise code. You were obviously already in the industry when it was introduced 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah. What are some of the things that you've seen as a result? What are some advantages you've seen for developers and investors since that low-rise code has come in? Have you seen that there's been an improvement in that space of duplexes, or have you seen that it's actually gone backwards now that we can do these type of developments under this low rise code?
Yeah, well, I was lucky enough to be already working in the industry when the CDC Low Rise Diversity Code came out, and even more because before it came out, there were some competitions to make part of the actual CDC writing code. So I was involved in that as well. So pretty much I knew the code before it came out by heart,
which is a bit of an advantage.
which it was a big advantage on our side. But I also think that it hit the time where the code came out and the boom in the industry, in the construction also ramped up.
Yeah.
So I think that it is a huge benefit for developers and for first-time owners, this code, because it is so fast-tracked that you don't have to be paying holding blocks for sometimes 6 months, 8 months, a year that might take a DA to be approved, while if you are doing CDC, you just do it faster.
Yeah.
And there is black or white. There is no gray.
Yeah.
So you know that you get in and you get out as quick as you can. You build it properly and you are out of it, or you are already living on it. So it is huge benefits for investors and for people that is not as familiar with the construction. And by saying that, it means it's faster moving the construction within the industry in New South Wales.
Yeah.
So definitely it's a huge improvement, yes.
Yeah. And I guess leading up to that low-rise code coming out, as you said, you were doing all of your duplexes via DA.
Mm-hmm.
Were you starting to find some frustration, both yourself as a designer and within the company Duplex Building Design, but were you seeing a frustration in investors and developers too, where because of the stress around delays, like some DAs, like what are we talking, 6, 7 months, even 12 months, some DAs for duplexes in a contentious area where there's objections?
I wish I can say soon you were. I still say I am,
Yes.
because some of the duplexes, unfortunately, we still have to go to DA.
Yes.
So definitely I experienced frustration myself, the clients as well, because there is a lot of subjective approaches when you do DA. As I said, in CDC, you either comply or you don't. So there is not much personal interpretation about the codes and the regulations. And I'm not saying that it's always bad to go DA. There are a lot of benefits, okay? But if the aim is to be an investor, if the aim is to sometimes be as upfront to time, cost, best approach to the site, definitely I would say that CDC is the way of going.
Yeah. And I guess with the interest rates now, obviously most investors and developers are paying higher interest, and some are even having to get private money, which obviously involves even higher interest rates. So time's probably never been more critical than it is, I guess, in the climate we're in now, where every month it adds up. Like even one of my own developments at the moment, we're paying $20,000 a month in interest, and you know, that's all just coming. Even though we're not paying it now, we're paying it at the end of the project. But like it all comes off at the end profit. So, that 6 months in council,
It's
it can
significant
add up.
amount of
You
money.
can chew right into your margin, and then it's some projects it nearly becomes pointless doing the development, doesn't it?
Yeah, so I believe that the fact of having this way of approval, it is what that New South Wales needs in relation to the housing crisis, because it doesn't mean they are not well designed, or that there is probably even better designs because you have the time to spend and the money. But in relation to the approval, it means you can't get an approval in 2 months, 3 months if you get onto all the consultants on time. So we are talking about a CDC, meaning from beginning to ready for construction in 3 months or less,
as opposed to
a DA
9 months, 12
9 months or 12 months for DA, and you have to add to that CC. So definitely is a benefit.
Yeah, so it's obviously a huge advantage in the industry, and the fact you've done so many, obviously you've developed a lot of tricks and hacks. So we're going to pull out some things. We're going to try and get some of Maria's brain, some of your brain today, and we're just going to try and lay it out. Because obviously the whole point of what we're trying to do here is to educate, help just give value to investors and developers who are looking at the potential of doing a duplex, and even at some stage we'll get you back on and we'll talk about other developments too, like detached dual occupancies, keeping a house, doing a new one. There's just so many odd things we can do, isn't there? Triplexes, fourplexes,
yeah,
or they call
so
them
many
terraces, obviously, don't they? But so I think that's just another episode in itself. Terraces.
Nice ones, yeah.
Excellent. And I guess it'd be good just to get a bit of an idea, even just around the design process, because I think obviously you'd know this back to front because you're doing it day in, day out, the design process. But like I know even myself that a good smooth design process can take a lot of stress away from the project, but it can also deal with a lot of complexity. I'm sure you've had it before where clients haven't been able to get the ideas out of their head. So I think it's even good for investors and developers to understand how to bring a suitable brief, or how to be clear on what you're wanting to achieve, because at the end of the day, like we spoke about, time's such a valuable thing, but also avoiding the backward and forward. Even if it's a high end, like obviously you do high end, you do mid spec, you do all different diversities of projects depending on the area that it's in, because it's all about obviously the client making good money and a great product. But I guess it'd be good just to get some ideas out of your head, just how you found, because I find that you're incredible at hitting a brief, and that's an important thing as a designer, and I think it's an important thing as a developer and an investor to have. I guess have a designer that just understands the process. So it'd be good just even if you can just run us through what you find projects that have worked really smoothly and really well. What are some of the key things you've found in that design process that have been fundamental?
I think that one of the major and most important things, even before we start the project, or I start the project, is that I know developers most of the times are busy, but I need, or at least before I build a relationship with them, knowing what they are after, it is important for them to actually sit a little bit and write a brief. Because sometimes they are thinking that you get what they have in their mind. So at least give me something. Give me, I want a mid spec, I want a high spec, and what that defines for them. The way of construction and things like that. After a few projects, you probably already know the developer that much that you don't even call them. You're already onto the design and they just say, yep. Yeah. But before, I think a good brief, not a huge, but at least a conversation about what they are after.
Yeah.
In order for me to hit a brief is, I want the best for the site always. But sometimes I need to think this is for the benefit of the developer, but also sometimes for the homeowners.
Yeah,
so
I like that.
Exactly. So it means as a designers, sometimes we think, oh, but that is not correct. So we do what we want kind of thing. So I try to compromise in what I believe is the best while giving what they want, hearing what they want, and making it compliant.
Yeah.
If it comes down to the point where I totally disagree with the request, then I try to take them out in the sense of showing them how it looks, what they want, and showing them my version of what they want with an improved area. Even if they decide to go for what they want, well, is their investment,
it's their choice,
correct?
Yeah.
It's their choice. Yeah. But most of the times they go with my option.
Yeah.
So that is mostly to be able to be clear at the brief. And the other key element is when they receive a concept, take a little bit of time to analyze what they have received, because sometimes they are, again, busy. they approve it, and then you go to a head when they realize that there is something that they actually didn't want it.
They haven't digested it.
Exactly. Or they just gave you the feedback way too quick to keep moving, and they just didn't think about their request thoroughly. So that is probably the best advice I can give, to give a good brief, to spend a little bit of time on what is the change that they want, and be clear with them, because many times they request the changes, but as a designer you keep making them, and sometimes you cannot hit what they want because they haven't really been able to be clear with what they want, because they didn't want to sketch it up or give you a call or things like that.
And that can be tricky, can't it? Just to jump in, I think you've nailed something there in terms of that, because you've got, isn't it interesting, every client, in our case, in this case, you're talking about investors and developers, you're dealing with different personalities, aren't you? Because some are very dominant, so they're just like this, and this. But then you get others who they can micromanage.
Yeah, hard ones.
Which, you know, even if you are a developer and investor listening to this podcast, like one of the things that I think can hinder your progress as a developer can be where you micromanage, and what that can do then, you tend not to get the best out of your team, like whether it be designer, engineer, builder, because people get too constricted. But you spoke about something I hadn't thought of that, and I just think that's a really amazing top point, that a developer and investor could have an idea of what they've got in mind for their duplex, but all of a sudden as a designer, because you've seen it day in, day out, you've designed hundreds of these things, and you've probably also heard feedback from agents and from clients where something didn't work, and you can see that an investor wants to do a particular element of the design that you know that the end buyer is going to detest that. So, and that's where I think it can be so critical, can't it? Like to have a designer who actually has the courage to speak up, not so much for their own ego to get their design idea across, but because deep down you want that product to be amazing for the client, but you want the end user, the person who buys that product, just to say, how amazing is this duplex? Like this just feels, it flows, it.
Yeah.
Like, do you want to just speak into that? Because I think you hit a topic there.
I think everybody that works with us is extremely proud of their designs. For me and the team that I work with, they are our babies. So I definitely always want them to be as best as they can. We also, not drafters, it's all right to be a drafter, but we want to do a design. So if the builder or the developer comes to us with, this is exactly what we want, and sketch it, well, that is all right, but we can't give you our input as a designers to make it better.
Yeah.
So that is when it doesn't mean in a rude way to say we can improve the layout that you gave us, and let me prove you, let me show you. So that is when the developer needs to be a bit more open-minded, in the sense of being able to receive that feedback. Doesn't mean they have to approve it, but they might run it through their real estate, and then they will hear, yes, they're most likely to be right, because we work with this all the time.
Yeah.
And a developer might do 10 a year.
Yeah.
We do 300.
Yeah,
so it's a big difference.
Yeah. And in terms of the design side of it, I think the tricky thing can be then if because you've seen so much of this in terms of a good layout, a good design, the developer's obviously looking at their way of seeing things, but like a poor design can actually then mean it could take 2, 3, 4, 5 months to sell the product if there was some really big design flaws in the design. Like if you say, what are your thoughts around that?
I think my thought around the design itself is that if somebody takes a floor plan or a facade and thinks that it's extremely easy to do, that anybody could do it, it means you are a good designer.
Yeah.
Okay? Because it's not that easy.
Yeah.
Right? It's a lot of thought into how things can flow. So as the good designers mean it looks like a 3-year-old can do it.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you hit that, you have reached the top at design.
Yeah.
Because it is about harmony. It's about you being able to know where things should go without thinking that they should go there.
Yeah.
And that is to the other side of the brain. So when you can develop a layout, which under Maria's perspective is the most important part of the design, the layout, then we can work around the architectural style, how the house looks like, and the colors and all of these other things that are also important. But as long as there is a good feel of the house, somebody will buy it straight away. But even better, if there are small touches or it's a good design, it is pretty, it is well built, it does have good quality, people not just buy it, they will pay extra to have it.
Yeah, yeah.
So that is when it is important to pick a good designer, because we just don't want the person to sell them. We want them to sell them fast and get top dollar.
Yeah. And you touched on flow there, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot more people, the end buyer now, are looking at how a house flows.
Yeah.
In this case, how a duplex flows. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, just in terms of flow? Like, what are you looking for when you talk about flow? And look, not that an investor or developer needs to fully embed themselves and engage themselves, but I think it is important for them to understand that what a good designer is thinking about when it is flow, because I'm sure it can be frustrating for you. Sometimes you could create this incredibly well-designed floor plan. Like you said, a good design looks simple because you've thought through all those sort of things, but sometimes a developer can look at it and just say, oh, that was easy. But
Yeah.
A good designer, like you said, will make it easy. But what are some things you're thinking about? Obviously, every design is different, but just to get some things out of your head, what are some things that, in terms of flow, like you might even talk about certain parts of a typical 4-bedroom, for example, duplex. What are some things you're thinking of in your head, in your designer brain?
Yeah.
When you're...
I think a lot about furnishing, where things will go or where potentially can go. And because of my background, I also like to change the layouts. So my preference is not to think that the sofa or the head of the bed head must always go on that wall. So I like to at least have 2 options in my head. So I like to think about it. I have a preference of obviously not having to open the powder room into your dining table. I like the idea of as bigger the house gets and as the budget allows us to have most likely 2 living areas where we can have a bit of parents retreat, teenagers retreat, office, things like that. But hopefully we can always give something of the feel of luxury.
Yep.
Doesn't matter at which budget or location. I love the idea of making it feel grand, light, some features, simple features that make you feel like this is not just what I could afford.
Yeah.
Right? This is, this is my house because this is what I could pay. No, this is my house. And I absolutely love what the designer did.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter which budget it is. No always has to be the expensive high end where you can give a little bit of granted feeling. So as big as spaces for certain areas, an island, most of the times an open living, which is what we do 99% of the times.
Yeah.
Unless sometimes we request another backgrounds.
Cultural background.
Cultural backgrounds. They request sometimes something different.
Yep.
But in the general terms, we try to give as much light, as much seeing through and open spaces.
Yeah.
That's mostly.
That's good. And I guess we've got a record number of, I guess you'd say my parents, our parents' generation now that are getting closer to retirement, like the baby boomer generation. So I've seen this, and I don't know if you have, but there's more and more people now looking at the option of a duplex with like a master bedroom / guest bedroom with an ensuite downstairs, so you can have like, you know, as you're getting older, so you don't have to walk upstairs, but you can have the upstairs section for either for the grandkids and the kids when they come to visit, or even now we're seeing so many, you know, older kids having to stay living with parents or moving in with their parents for a while to save for a mortgage. Like, are you seeing that now? There's a real trend of people wanting a bedroom downstairs where possible.
Yes, totally. Yes, a multi-purpose bedroom downstairs or master sometimes. There is one thing under the CDC, which is the topic, which we see not that often, but we have seen it, and is that the duplex don't have to be identical.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes they can be semi-detached, attached, or fully detached. And the fact that they don't have to be identical means that if you own a block where you can have one side 2-story and you can have the other half or the other dwelling single story. So that would be a really good way of downsizing. Also, the layouts don't have to be the same. So you can have half of the house for an investment for a young family or for a standard duplex, while half of the other, like the other half, it is accessible, livable, all of these future-proof dwellings. So currently I'm working in Malua Bay in a duplex where half of it is for a couple where the lady is in a wheelchair. So it's great because half of the duplex is fully accessible while the other one is standard. So one of them is a bit bigger because it's for them, and the other one is smaller.
That's
so
brilliant.
it is really good. But in future proofing grandparents, yes, we can have masters at the ground floor. We can have a guest bedroom downstairs, meaning that if the day comes where you prefer to be at the lower level, you can still have a master in the first floor. Or we can allow for have a lift, or just use it for storage or walking linen at the moment, but knowing that, hey, my designer did it. So if there is a day that I need a lift, I have already my lift core available. So pretty much you just need to bring the lift in and it would be accessible. So it's like those sort of things that if you think that will help you in the future, we can plan and design for it.
That's so good. And I guess in terms of even understanding the developer's strategy is important, isn't it, too? Because if they're looking to, they might be wanting to sell one side straight away and maybe hold the other side for a long-term rental. And I think you touched on something really great there. You don't have to design each one exactly the same. So, for example, if you're wanting to sell one straight away, well, you might have to have some features in that to be able to sell it and make maximum profit. Whereas the one you're holding long term as a rental, you may not need certain features because you could have certain features in that are maybe not as up spec. But if you're holding it for a long term rental, like who's going to know what the difference in certain tiles or certain finishes that rental, like you're going to get very, very similar rent potentially anyway. So do you come across sort of clients that might want to live in one side for a little bit, then sell it, or live in one side and then sell the other where you've had to do it slightly different?
Yes. To the point of that much is slightly different, and that sometimes we have design detached dwelling that are totally different.
Yeah.
One is white and the other one is black.
Yeah.
So they definitely don't need to be the same. And sometimes they might want to sell and rent the other, or they might want to live in one and sell the other.
Yes.
So it is actually sometimes the opposite, where they have used a much higher specs where they want to live in, and then they sell the other with not low, but just mid specs.
Yes.
So we do that. And it is also sometimes clients are going to sell them both straight away, or we have had some cases lately where they sell them off plans. So that means they allowed for the new owners to have their input in the finishes and things like that. So it's a lot of flexibility around in that sense, where we're not attached to it must be used or it must be selected finishes or looks. You might want one to look modern and the other one to look Hamptons, for example.
Yeah.
That is mostly when they are detached.
Yeah.
When they are attached, they don't have to be identical, but obviously we want it to be a cohesive design, so we don't want to be attached and two different architectural styles.
Yeah. So essentially, if you're looking to say sell one, there may be some things the agent wants you to do internally.
Yeah.
Some extra finishes you could do on that side. But if you want to hold this one for quite a while, some of those finishes the agent may say, look, you're not going to get any extra rent by spending that extra money on the extra 20 mil bench top or going ridiculous on your stone, on your tiles, on some of your finishes, because it's just going to get wear and tear. And if you're holding it for 10, 20 years, well, that extra 50K could be better in your pocket than on a build that's not going to net any extra rent.
Yeah.
So that's possible. Like
100%. Yeah.
That's great.
So that's one of the possibilities.
Yeah. So I guess an important thing is very much like you said in that initial brief. It's so important, isn't it, for the developer to know what their plan is, to have that strategy in mind.
It is important, yes, to the developer to communicate as well, to let them guide them in certain areas, especially because the market is moving very fast. So what it was demanded before COVID or just right after COVID to what is demanded now, it is different.
Yeah.
The trends are changing. The architectural trends are changing very fast. So what certain people wanted 5 years ago is different to what they are looking for now.
Yeah.
So if a developer is so narrow-minded in the sense of this is what I want and this is because it worked 5 years ago and it's been working in the last 5 years, is like, okay, but if we want to keep growing or keep pushing ahead, we need to also go with the flow of the market at the moment.
Yeah. And it is moving so quick, isn't it?
It is,
like it's just sometimes it's not even every year, it's every couple of months.
Yeah, well, it is ridiculous how fast the trend, the demands, the approval process, everything is changing really fast.
And look, obviously I want to talk a little bit about just some of the things, compliance side of things. We don't have to go too into depth, but I guess often we can come across sites where someone's gone on board a site of an agent that's got issues and constraints where you can't do CDC. But do you think it's important for a design firm, a design company, planners, designers to be involved before a developer goes and buys a site? Like, do you find that there are issues where developers are often buying sites without really like getting someone to look in depth into the constraints and whether a CDC can be done?
Some developers, yes, especially when they are new into the business. Some people that is trying to have development as a side business, they usually trust the real estate. Nothing wrong, they're trying to sell, but they don't have that full knowledge of what are the full requirements. So it does come more often that you might think that some landowners come and say, well, I want a duplex or I want a townhouse development. Like, well, I'm really sorry, but your block is not suitable for that, or in that particular council is not suitable. So it is important to hear the feedback from people who works in that field, especially because currently the requirements might change from council to council. So what might work in Sydney might not work in the Illawarra. Yeah. So you need to be aware of that. That is important to receive the feedback prior to buying, I think, and be able to know, well, if I cannot fit a duplex, what is it still worth to have the land? Or if you wanted townhouses, is it still feasible if I have 4? Happy if I have 5, but it's still feasible. So that is the sort of thing that it is really important to hear from experts on. Yes, we are gonna be able to fit this. But also then other parts of before buying the land are very important, like covenants, easements, solar orientation, sewers. All of these things are really important, but as well as the lot size, the width. All of
Well, maybe we could talk about it. Just a few of these things. And obviously, like you said, it's important. Part of it being a good developer is having your dream team. And we're going to talk a lot about developing your dream team over the life of this podcast, because for me, having a great team of consultants, of professionals around you will take the stress away from a project, will make your life easier, will ensure that you don't buy bad sites. And so, look, it'd be just for someone who's at least looking for sites to bring a planner or bring a designer, like let's talk about just some of the constraints. Like, what are we talking? Like, what size blocks do we need to look for? Obviously, every council's different, but what about that?
Well, it depends if the actual council defines a minimum lot size. So if it does define it, then it refers to what the council minimum lot size is. But if the council doesn't have a minimum lot size for the dual lock, then it's 450.
Yes.
But then it also comes down to the width of the block. It is important to know that, for example, the block might be an irregular shape. So the fact that you look at a block and that the boundary at the front says 14 meters and it is plays out at the back, when you look at the block, you say, okay, it's not CDC, but that is not the case. The 15 meters is required at the building line, so where the actual building is set back. So as long as it is where you are setting it back, it does comply. So it's all of these tricks and things that you need to hear, and it needs to be analyzed by the expert. So this is where we're talking that it plays out. What happens if it displays in? What happens if the block says at the boundary 15 meters, but another point at the back is 15 meters, so we don't comply?
You can't do it,
right?
That's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of people, they do think that. They see on the real estate, normally the real estate will tell you the block's 14 metres wide, so straight away they throw that side away. But like you said, if it splays out, and so in terms of the building line, you just hit something really good there, because I think a lot of investors and developers probably don't know this. They probably think it is 15 at the boundary. But so how is the building line determined under the CDC?
So it depends.
Is it 4.5 or is it 6? Or like councils have different setbacks? How's the front setback determined under the CDC?
Well, depends if it is a new land subdivision. So if it is a new land, it is based on the lot size. So it sometimes might be 4.5 for the actual building for a standard 15-meter block, 450 square. 4.5 meters at the building line, and the garage must be 1 meter setback, so 5.5. That is if you don't have neighbors, or if the neighbors are getting built. But
so like for an infill,
for a
lot of infill, how do we determine that?
That is for new lots is a code that is a black or white. This is your 4.5 if you have these blocks between this area. But if you have neighbors, then we need the average setback of the two immediate neighbors to a habitable. Very important, to a habitable.
So not to the garage,
not to the carport, not to the porch, not to the balcony, to the habitable. So what is habitable? A living, a bedroom, things like that. So the average of those two is your required front setback, which it will be your building line.
And I'm guessing you've seen it happen where someone's bought a block where it meets a lot of the constraints, but the two neighbours might be, let's say, 10 metres or 15 metres back. So that can really break it, a CDC, can't it?
It is, it is the downside of the CDC, because in council through DA, for example, you are required 6 meters most of the times for the front setback, regardless of what your neighbors are doing. Unfortunately, with CDC, they try unfortunately for the requirement, but understandable for the the cohesive neighborhood, you need the average of your neighbor. So it comes down then to what we were talking before about a good assessment of your site, because it might meet everything dream site, but if your neighbors are 10 meters, you also need 10 meters.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and we cannot do anything about it.
Yep.
Unless you buy the neighbors and knock them down.
Yep. That's it. So check your neighbours. Check your neighbours' setbacks.
Yeah.
If they're too big.
Yeah. But also important to know sometimes you need to know the neighbors, what are they facing?
Yes.
Because there are
If they're
times,
on a corner block,
but well, sometimes the blocks go side to side, or your neighbor goes side to side, even you don't.
Yes.
So you might look at the neighbor, and the neighbor actually has the entry, their garages, and everything facing the opposite street. So that means that that neighbor is while you are looking at your front setback, that is your rear neighbor setback. So that is not applicable.
So if this neighbour on the left has a laneway behind it, and that house next door is actually facing the laneway, what you're saying is that one then would not count.
No, because that is the rear setback.
Yeah. So you could go the next one over if it's within 40
If it is within
metres.
40 meters, you are required to go to the next one.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you might have just to match the one on your right.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that feedback alone is a good reason why it's so important to have someone doing these checks.
Yeah. I don't know if I believe there are a few real estate agents and some town planners out there covering all of these requirements. But I believe that if you can have your dream team where you have a good real estate agent passing it through your designer to make sure all of these requirements are met before you purchase your land, that is the way of doing it.
You're right, aren't you? Because even yourself, like I'm sure you're relying on other consultants, whether it be stormwater engineers, arborists, like there's probably a range of different people you need to be talking with, even to look at the constraints with all your experience, even looking at a site for a developer or an investor. I'm sure you're relying on a whole range of different team before the clients even purchase that site, just to ensure that stormwater works. It works from a bushfire perspective.
There are certain consultants that I don't like to even begin the design before hearing their feedback. And yes, some of them are definitely arborists to know what can we do with the trees on site, if we can propose to knock them down, or if we need to design around them. Another requirement is the bushfire. Important, because if you are more than Val 29, you cannot even have a dual occupancy. So, and also because if by providing 1 more meter, 2 more meters in your design, your val for the house changes to a lower, and you're saving that amount of money, you better do it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So that is the sort of things that are important to find out before you actually get too into the design, and then you have to then start building more to make changes or adapt the design to the constraints for the feedback from the consultants.
That's so good. And I reckon we've got another episode alone, don't we, just talking about constraints side of things. So we might park that one, but I really want to talk about a case study, or even just tell us about a project you're proud of, or a project that you had really good success with the client with, and maybe just talk about a few key elements that I guess might help people that are wanting to do a development or do a duplex, just a case study, I guess. Is there a project that
There are different projects with different outcomes that make me proud. So depends of where you want to look from which perspective. I feel proud of jobs where people have brought their sites and said, all right, I want a duplex here, and we have been able to tell them, all right, well, if this is an investment, we're not going to knock this house. We're going to have the duplex, the other house next to it, and we are having suddenly an extra house with keeping the existing house. So it is a huge profit for the developer. We have done that in several places, some of them attached dwellings to the existing where it was a standing home. So it is a personal win.
Yeah.
Sometimes they might not be the most the full new brand new 2 duplexes design that you think,
Yeah.
but they are still very good.
Yeah.
And we can make a design of the new dwelling be cohesive with existing dwelling and don't look like a totally different houses.
Yeah.
So that is one of the designs.
And I guess profit, just jumping into that one,
Yeah.
like being able to, the rare time where you can do that, sometimes being able to keep a dwelling's huge for profitability.
It is a huge profit,
because,
yeah.
Yeah. You're
Which
not,
is investors, yeah.
You're not having to knock down a house to then build it again. So sometimes, and I've seen this, sometimes you can even get land, virtually the land for the second dwelling, then it's
For free.
potentially for free.
Yeah. So that is one of the win things in relation to investment.
Yes.
Personally, I have been experiencing now extra features, especially at mid to high end, where we can have dual purpose, or for example, have pools in places where before it was a bit tricky. Or one of the also big wins is use CDC in locations where the people who lives around in the neighborhood are so hesitant to you developing.
Yes.
And in CDC, as long as you comply, well, I'm sorry.
Can't
So
object.
it is been amazing to hear sometimes clients coming and saying, oh, well, they just have objected that much that I have had refusals from council.
Yeah.
And be able to have a beautiful, well done, well designed, and not affecting the neighbors without having to hear that much complaints is amazing. So those are also personal wins. And obviously my wins are to see a pretty well-designed house and built. That is...
Yeah.
That
That's the
feels,
dream, isn't
yeah.
it, as a designer?
Yeah.
To be able to walk through a finished project.
Yeah, getting an approval is a big win, especially
Ring the bell.
ring the bell. Yeah. That is the achievement, the maximum achievement, to get it approved. But even better when the client walks out happy.
Yeah.
When they hit a good price at selling them.
Yeah.
When I have had a few projects that when they sell, they are record sales.
Yeah. That's a pretty big win.
That's a big win.
Yeah.
That's a big win. And especially when I have heard your feedback and now they're getting much more money in their pockets than they thought.
Yeah.
That's a massive win.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of for what I do.
That's great. Well, it's been so good to have you on, Maria. I'm sure this will be the first of many chats we're going to be having.
I'm sure we will.
About everything design, everything development. But look, just for listeners who've enjoyed listening to you and wanting to work with you, do you want to, I guess, just give us a little bit of information how people can contact you, where they can find you, and just I guess a little bit more around what you and the team can offer.
Well, I work at Duplex Building Design. I work at the Kiama-based office, but I am the head building designer. So if I'm not the building designer looking after the project, I will always be involved in different ways.
Yeah.
I have a team that works with me that they are extremely capable, all of them. So if it is not Maria looking after the team, you can be assured that somebody very capable is working with you and that I will always be there as well. You can contact us through social media, call our office, email us. There's a lot of different ways of contacting us. We can help you with the design. We can help you with the site constraints, analyzing your site before you purchase it, or finding just the most suitable layout. What can you fit? Sometimes people comes with thinking they can fit only 2, and then we ended up fitting 3. So definitely we can help everybody with that.
Amazing. Well, it's been good having you on. Look, just for a couple of minutes, do you want to just share any just last insights, last thoughts just around for maybe first-time investors, first-time developers? Just is there any insights you can leave us with in regards to doing a duplex?
Well, thank you for having me. And especially for the first one, it is a pleasure. It's been amazing to work with you. And my thoughts are build your dream team. Build somebody who knows what you are after, that you pretty much trust them, that you receive the plans and the design and you say, yep, let's keep moving. Because there is nothing worse than somebody that is in a totally different page. So just spend your time with one design so you and the designer can be speak the same language. We are also many designers in our office. So if I cannot pick your brain, I'm sure there would be somebody else in my office that will. So if we might do a shift in designer for you to feel comfortable, but there will be your dream team will make your life easier. You will always get less headaches. And then the same with consultants. We work with unbelievable professional consultants. So if you connect with the 5 or 10 people that you always go with, they all know what you are after, and less headaches, faster, and you could just go through it easier.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. It's been good to have you on.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for listening in. We hope you've enjoyed this very first episode. We're excited for the future of this podcast, and we just want to be a resource. We want to be part of your dream team and bring really good education, really good thoughts, really good things to the table for you to consume week in, week out. So make sure you tune in from 5 a.m. every single Wednesday. So thanks for listening in. Be sure to follow us, be sure to like us, and there'll also be information about Maria and Duplex Building Design in the show notes.